What costs $315,000, a public apology, and a headline that won't stop following a team into the next week? A momentary lapse in judgment, and the NFL wants you to know it matters. He's up, he's hurt, and the tent door swings open. Rookie QB Jaxson Dart takes a hit late in the third quarter against the Eagles, jogs off the field, and is escorted into the blue medical tent for the league's mandated concussion evaluation. That tent exists so doctors can work without distraction, with only essential medical staff allowed inside. That rule isn't theater. It's the firewall between a thorough exam and the pressure to get a player back into the game. But on that sideline, Giants head coach Brian Daboll and running back Cam Skattebo both went into the tent while Dart's evaluation was still underway. The NFL and NFLPA reviewed the footage and the process, and on Friday, they announced fines. The team $200,000, Daboll $100,000, and Skattebo $15,000. Reuters. Let's be crystal. The joint review found that the medical staff and the unaffiliated neurotrauma consultant did follow the concussion protocol steps correctly, and that Dart's exam itself was not compromised. He was cleared and finished the game, throwing for 195 yards with both a passing and rushing touchdown. But the decision to enter the tent, to be there while the exam was happening, created the perception of possible interference. Perception matters in player safety realms because it undermines trust in the process that's supposed to be apolitical, clinical, and sacred. The league's point of view, even the appearance of influence is punishable because the stakes are life and long-term brain health, not just the scoreboard. NFL.com, Con Bronco. So what actually happened in the tent, and why did the league react this way? Daboll said after the game he was only trying to understand whether Dart could come back in time to influence a late-game decision, a familiar coach's instinct. Skattebo said he went in to check on his teammate. Neither action is pure malice, but the protocol is binary. Only medical personnel may be present during the evaluation. Non-medical intervention, however well-meaning, creates a perception problem and undermines the principle of an independent medical assessment. That's what the NFL emphasized in its joint statement with the players' union, and that's why fines were levied, even though the exam itself reportedly wasn't affected. NFL.com, here's the human angle nobody's allowed to lose sight of. Everybody on that sideline is trying to win, and men who love the game panic when they see one of their own get knocked down. Coaches and teammates are wired to rush in, but medical protocol was written to counteract that wiring, to protect players from quick decisions and from emotional pressure to return. The line between caretaking and interference is thin, and when it blurs, the league has to enforce consequences to deter future breaches. That's why the fines weren't symbolic. They were punitive and preventative. The Guardian now, let's talk optics and accountability. Daboll is the head coach, the visible steward of the team's identity. A six-figure fine is not pocket change, but it's also not existential for an NFL coach. What matters more is the message. Coaches must respect medical boundaries, even when the temptation to check on a starter is overwhelming. Skattebo, a rookie, received a smaller fine, but rookies learn faster when the league makes examples of breaches. The franchise fine is the blunt instrument that signals organizational responsibility. Teams are responsible for ensuring staff, players, and access control follow the rules. NorthJersey.com. Let's zoom out. This is not the first time the NFL has had to enforce the medical tent standard, but it might be one of the clearest modern examples where cameras, social media, and high stakes converged. The league and the NFLPA released a joint statement stressing that evaluations must occur either in the blue tent or the locker room, and that only certain medical personnel are permitted inside. The point of the policy is to insulate medical judgment from any on-field pressure. When that insulation is breached, even by people who say they were only checking, the league acts to preserve the integrity of the process for everyone, not just one player or one team. NFL.com, what should the Giants do next, practically speaking? First, lock down access. If your tent is a revolving door, fix the hardware and the human gates. Second, retrain everyone, players, coaches, staff, on exactly who can enter and why. Third, build a communication protocol for coaches, a single, clear channel to ask medical personnel about timing without entering the tent or speaking to the player during evaluation. The NFL even noted the Giants took immediate remedial steps, more training and steps to restrict tent access, but the longer-term work is cultural, making sure the instinct to protect the player and help the team doesn't overrule the rule that exists to protect the player first. The Guardian. There are also narrative consequences. In a league where every sideline moment is broadcast and replayed, a misstep like this becomes a story that follows you. Fans debate intent, pundits debate punishment fairness. The players who matter, the ones who will be tending to each other in the locker room, notice whether their organization defends their safety. That's intangible, but it's real. When trust in the safety process erodes, players get angrier, agents ask questions, and the club's reputation for player care takes a hit. For a franchise, reputation is a long-game asset. Fines are an immediate hit. But respect is the currency that shapes future drafts, signings, and morale. ProFootballRumors.com. Now for the tougher moral question. Did the NFL overreact, or was it overdue? Opinions will split. Some will say the coach's motive was pure and the fine excessive. Others will argue that if you permit any sideline interference for good motives, you open a Pandora's box where coaches will lobby on the sidelines and medical independence will erode. When the subject is brain health, the NFL's enforcement approach is conservative by necessity. You can disagree about the dollar amount. You shouldn't argue about the principle that the exam must be protected. When safety is the baseline, strict enforcement makes compliance clearer and faster. Newsweek finish on the signal that matters most. Protocol isn't punishment for feeling compassion. It's a system built to make sure compassion doesn't cause harm. Coaches, players, and fans all love the heat of the moment, but the blue tent is intentionally cold, clinical, rule-bound, and non-negotiable. If this chapter teaches anything, it's this. Caring for a teammate sometimes means stepping back, not stepping in. That's the hard lesson, and in the end, it's the only one that keeps quarterbacks walking off the field healthy for years to come. Reuters. They hit the Giants where it hurts, the wallet. The NFL and NFLPA announced joint fines today after head coach Brian Daboll and RB Cam Skattebo wandered into the blue medical tent while rookie QB Jaxson Dart was being evaluated for a concussion, and the penalties are steep. $200,000 to the Giants, $100,000 for Daboll, and $15,000 for Skattebo. NFL.com, here's why this matters beyond headline shock value. The concussion protocol is intentionally blunt. When a player goes into the tent for a head injury evaluation, only medical personnel deemed essential may be present: team physician, athletic trainer, and the unaffiliated neurotrauma consultant. That closed-door rule exists, so the exam happens without any pressure, distraction, or the appearance of influence. Daboll and Skattebo stepping in created a perception of interference, and that perception is exactly what the league and the players' union agreed had to be penalized. ESPN.com, important nuance, the joint review cleared the Giants' medical staff. Investigators found the club's medical personnel and the unaffiliated neurotrauma consultant properly followed all of the steps required under the collective bargaining agreement in evaluating Dart. The fines were not levied because the medical exam was botched. They were levied because non-medical people entered a space that's supposed to be sacrosanct. That's the difference between a medical failure and a procedural breach, and the league treated it as the latter. ESPN.com, Daboll's reaction after the play explains the human side, but not the defense. He said he looked in because he wanted to know whether to burn a timeout and get his QB back on the field, a coach's instinct in the heat of a close game. Skattebo said he was checking to make sure Dart wasn't hurting anybody. Both explanations sound reasonable in the moment. Both still violate the explicit rules. The NFL's point: good intentions don't get you into the tent. The rule is black and white to protect players first and to remove gamesmanship from medical decisions. The Guardian is techiner. This ruling also signals consistency from the league. The NFL has repeatedly emphasized concussion safety in recent years, and enforcement is how rules change culture. If teams or coaches feel comfortable bending that rule for strategic reasons or even emotional reasons, then the tent's protective purpose collapses. The league and the union made a joint public statement that these boundaries must be respected. The fines are a reminder that player health protocols are not optional theater. NFL.com, there's also a practical follow-up. The Giants cooperated with the investigation and reportedly took immediate remedial steps: additional training for staff and players, tightened access to the tent, and clearer on-field procedures. Those are exactly the operational fixes the league wants to see, because fines alone don't stop future slip-ups. Process fixes do. Dart himself was cleared to return that night and finish the game, which helps the immediate optics, but the league still needed to draw a line. ESPN.com. For fans, this can feel petty. A coach looks in on his young QB, a player checks on a teammate, but the rules exist because the cost of one missed or pressured concussion exam is potentially catastrophic. The NFL is trying to institutionalize caution. That means occasionally penalizing behavior that used to be treated as instinct. If you're weighing the human impulse to check on someone against the duty to follow medical protocol, the league has made its choice. The protocol wins every time. Reuters expect a short-term media cycle, takes, apologies, he meant well, then new procedures to go into effect around team medical tents. The larger takeaway: player safety processes are now enforced with heavy fines and joint NFL-NFLPA scrutiny, and teams will be smart to bake those boundaries into how they train everyone on the sideline. The rule is simple. If it's a medical tent, it's medical people only. NFL.com.